Not now!
Hello and welcome inside the Parc Fermé for the podcast number 693, the British Grand Prix review. This is Todd.
No, Todd, not now!
AKA Negative Camber, and tonight we are going to cover the British Grand Prix because, damn it, it's the British Grand Prix. Formula One has come home, and it's the British Grand Prix. I'm excited about this, folks. I cannot lie. Now, before covering the British Grand Prix, I normally would introduce my guest, which would normally, well, you know who it is.
Hello, everybody. This is Paul Charles, the International.
Yeah. It's not Paul. I had to go find an even faster race car driver and another British guy who grew up, get this, at Silverstone. So what better way to do this? He's raced in Classic Le Mans, GT racing, the IMSA Continental Series, all kinds of endurance racing. He just raced this past weekend. What has he not raced? It's great to welcome back to the show, James Burke. James, how you doing?
Doing great, man. How's it going?
It's going well, man, and I am so elated to have you on the show. And this would be a really good time to tell our listeners just how much quicker you are as a racing car driver than Paul Charsley.
Oh, no question. I mean, it doesn't even have to debate. The old boy's getting old, isn't he? It is.
It's right. You know, those reflexes, James, when you're old like Paul, all you feel is pain,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's tough, man. It's great. Tell our listeners, we were just talking before the podcast. I obviously I knew you're British, but I didn't know where you grew up. And you said you just grew up just outside Silverstone.
Yeah, just a place called Hartwell.
Is it in Kent? No, it's an inside joke. Sorry.
No, it is in the Midlands somewhere. Mm-hmm. And I grew up there. In fact, I grew up watching F1, going to the races with my dad. And then I actually was an instructor there for a number of years too, since I was about 17, 18, and instructed there with some of the in fact, Karun Shundok was a friend and instructor that we used to mess around together back in the day.
Wow! So you got Karuned too?
Yes.
Wow.
And so yeah, a lot of history there. I miss it. I'm currently in Utah, chasing the dream of being a race car driver. But no, happy to be here.
Oh, that's awesome. So let's talk about this track. You've obviously hustled some sports cars around this circuit before, and probably some open wheel as well. And I want to talk to you about Silverstone. I always like to say, James, that this is the spiritual home of Formula One, right? And Formula One has come home, and it's always an epic event at Silverstone. It's a fantastic track. I know it's been changed 6, 7, 8 times over the course, and its newest configuration is still pretty challenging. Want to ask you what makes this track special from a driver's perspective, outside of the history, outside of the panache, if you will, from fans like me sitting at home, but from a driver's perspective, what makes this track so special?
I think it's hard to take away the history, because when you go there, you feel it.
Yeah,
right. It's something that you feel when it's like going you come to a racetrack that's brand new. There's no history. It's something that's like when you go to Charlotte Motor Speedway, for example, you feel the history. So it's hard to take that away, right?
Yeah.
Now that being said, obviously you show up at Silverstone and you know that you're at a place where champions are made. But putting that aside, it's an old and original track, right? So it's an old airfield that was turned into a racetrack. Majority of the terms obviously have been changed over the years, but there's some of those big high speed, real. I remember Cops being, back in the F1 early days in the 90s, where it was a real driver's turn, right? Where you're carrying a bunch of speed, you're clicking the gears, you're trying not to brake or carry too much brake. And so it's just one of those high speed, all time, kind of suck it up and get on with it, and if you weren't good with speed at the top end and using the aero, you weren't gonna get it.
Yeah.
And that's part of it, I think.
That's awesome. You're right. I mean, it's hard. It would be hard not to be a driver, get in a car, go through Stowe or Cops and think, Jim Clark went around this corner.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's just
and like that's Stowe corner. That's where Schumacher broke his leg back in 2002 or whatever it was.
Yeah, 2001 or whatever. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. And you go, wow. And this is where Nigel Mansell pushed his car because he had this. And
or this is where Johnny Herbert spun off at Club. Right. Yeah. That's so awesome.
But also, I mean, when you watch a modern F1 car go through Copse, Maggots, Beckett's, and you see it.
Mm-hmm.
It is like, how is this car even moving that fast from right to left? It's mind blowing.
Yeah,
so
it is
fantastic. It is.
And the only thing I can equate for us Yankees over here is when you're at Austin at Circuit of the Americas, and that's why Paul and I always like to sit like at turn 9, 8, 9, 10, 11, somewhere in there, because coming through those S's, James, that's where you actually see Formula One cars working at their optimum, at speed and changing direction. And you're right, it's just mind-boggling.
Yeah, absolutely.
But there's nothing like that Maggot-Beckett's complex is just, that's got to be so much fun to drive through at speed,
It is, and when you're driving a GT car, heavy one, you can get caught away with trying to carry too much speed into the first one, and then it just sends you further and further in the wrong place.
Yeah.
A modern F1 car, man, you just, you hold your stuff and you get through it. It's crazy.
That's so funny because Paul was always trying to tell me that when I was out at Sonoma. It's how you take that first cone if you're going, doing the cone exercise. And if you miss that first one, it ruins every single one after it,
Right.
It's so funny. It's things you don't think of when you're not a professional driver like you and Paul are. Let me ask you, one of the things you mentioned is airfield. And of course, they were all built where there's a lot of wind. That always helps lift for airplanes. And they're traditionally, we've always heard it's like rain at Spa, or wind at Silverstone. We always hear about that. But James, there was a lot of wind this weekend at Silverstone. I wanted to ask you just kind of your thoughts on the impact a wind can have. If you're going down Wellington Straight and you're bucking a tailwind or a headwind or vice versa, and then on the next straight you're doing the opposite, or even if you're going through Maggot-Beckett's and you got a crosswind coming across that rear plane, does that make a pretty big impact?
Yeah, it does. In fact, it's bigger than you think. If you can imagine being in a normal car, and a gust of wind just rocking the car, right? Mm-hmm. Imagine that in a car, in an F1 car that doesn't weigh that much, right? Mm-hmm. And now it's fighting against what you're trying to have the wings do. Mm-hmm. So let's say we're going down Hangar Straight and you've got a tailwind. Well, that's great because you're getting some more speed. But when you get to the end of that straight and then you then start to turn in, it's now going to produce maybe some lift at the back.
Right,
well, that's
right.
the first thing you want to have, some high-speed oversteer because of the tailwind, right?
Right.
It's already scary enough adding that into it.
Right.
And then also if we're going down Hangar Straight and we have a wind coming in to us, as we take the turn and we have a directional change, right? Depending on how well the speed of your hands are or how slow they are, all of a sudden it's going to change faster or not. So it's going to play either a little bit of understeer or oversteer, which, they're trying to change setup and have a consistency every single time. And now there's a change. It's a challenge. It's a challenge, and you're trying to anticipate it if you can.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and there were a lot of drivers complaining, about the wind. And it's the same for everyone, but it was making a big impact on some of their laps, and I found that interesting. Well, let's talk about the British Grand Prix. We typically, everybody saw qualifying, so we're just going to jump into the race. Let's run them down, James. We're going to start off with the winners. We'll start off with Mercedes. You had Lewis Hamilton with the victory in P1, Valtteri Bottas in P11. We'll talk about Valtteri first, and then we'll get into Lewis. At the onset, it looked like pretty much a ho-hum affair. It looked like both Lewis and Valtteri running 1-2. It looked like a complete domination, which technically it was. Mercedes running a second a lap faster than their rivals. And Lewis, was running in the lead. Valtteri running 1.2 to 2 seconds ish behind Lewis for most of the race. And like many others, they boxed for those hard compound tires after that second safety car. That was going to make for a long second stint, James. And most of the teams knew that was going to be a long duty cycle on those tires. And perhaps you could argue maybe it was a little too long of a duty cycle for Mercedes. But you can sense all the teams were really engaged, even before that, in tire management for most of the, 2/3 of that race. They were all engaged in tire management. So they knew they had issues. And Lewis said Bottas was actually pushing relatively hard, and therefore he was having to keep the pace up. And just with 2 laps to go, Bottas had that tire failure, prompting a stop, dropped him from P2 completely out of the points. He started second, he was doing well, keeping the pressure on. And, some were saying ahead of the race in the commentary team that, truth be known, they kind of felt like Valtteri should have opted for a 2-stopper at the outset just to mix it up and take the fight to Lewis, even though that may not have been the optimum strategy. But yeah, it was really bad. And the other thing he was saying, he was radioing in, James, at first he was radioing about the tire, about a vibration, and then later he started radioing in about his vision. He couldn't see. And I guess, James, when you're doing 200 plus miles an hour with a bad vibration, all of a sudden your head's just bobbling, and it would be hard to see.
Oh, it's actually scary. I mean,
Yeah.
the harmonics of it can make your chest feel strange.
Mm-hmm.
You can't see anything. What's interesting, though, is when on his stint, he complained of a vibration, but he didn't think it was the tire at first. And then it was like, oh, this is a tire issue. But yeah, I mean, vibration is really unnerving.
Mm-hmm.
And I was quite surprised that normally Mercedes are really good at understanding the tire and reading it right to that edge, and they missed something that this time, and I wonder what that was.
Yeah, I'm curious too, James. That when I saw the close-up shots of both Lewis and Valtteri, first I saw Lewis, and he had radioed that he had a blister. And then several laps later, we saw the first shot of him. His front right clearly had a blister, but it was really the front left. The front right is the tire I guess they're dragging around for majority of the track, and the front left is really doing a lot of the heavy lifting. And both of them, it was front left that ended up blowing. But I didn't at the time notice these blisters. I've read all kinds of conspiracies. Well, the DAS system was putting too much and wearing the fronts out, and who knows? But you're right. It was almost one of those things also on qualifying when it was so hot, or on practice when it was so hot. And the Mercedes, we know, typically doesn't like that hot of weather, but it was a lot cooler on race day. And I was curious about that too, about the tires. But you're absolutely right. Now that I think about it, he had radioed in about the vibration, and then later, because he probably thought, well, I didn't flat spot my tire.
Right. Yeah. As far as as I heard it, he said, I have a vibration, but it's not my tire. I think it's okay, but the vibration is there.
Yeah.
And then obviously it just got worse and worse and worse and worse. And
right.
But they missed it. And sometimes, it's very rarely, but if you're having a hard day on Saturday and you're not driving the car to the limit, right, and you're not getting everything out of it, and then they set the pressures based on some of those runs, you can easily tip that over on Sunday.
Right.
Because they get the pressures wrong. Now, that's at the level that I've done some stuff, but at this level, you would think that that's not an issue, right? That they've got so much computer stuff and algorithm, they're just figuring it out. But that was a strange one. It's a strange one.
It really was. Well, for Lewis's race, obviously, it goes without saying, Valtteri, the last thing he needed is a no points weekend on a truncated season with maybe 15 races. There's a lot of folks that feel like that was pretty much the nail in the coffin for the championship for him, unless Lewis has some sort of DNF over mechanical. But anyway, a bad weekend for Valtteri. For Lewis, He fitted those hards at the second stop, tried to make the most of the long second stint, and it was, again, a big duty cycle for these tires. And the teams were warning both drivers about the tires. So, in fairness, they were warning them. On the last lap, Lewis's tire deflated. What was it? He was a couple miles from the victory, and his tire deflated. He had to keep up enough pace to keep Max behind him, but slow enough so that the tire wouldn't delaminate and destroy basically his car. His when that tire delaminates and all of a sudden that flopping around tires tear your car up, and he had to work at that. So that was unfortunate. So difficult. But let's talk about that drive. And I feel like in a sense, I feel like that drive. Sorry, James, lost you, but you're back. So I kept going without you, buddy. It's all right. That's the beauties of Zoom. But anyway, I was just saying that tire. The one thing he had to do, James, was drive fast enough to keep Max behind him, but slow enough so it didn't delaminate and destroy his car. But driving 2 miles, at that moment, I bet your heart was in your throat. A terrific drive to get it over the finish line.
Oh, I mean it made the race exciting, I think, from that point of view. But first of all, it's funny because we didn't get to see them race that much because they were more looking at cars behind. But from his point of view, I think the takeaway I got from it was he did a better job on the tires. He got 2 more laps out of the tires, and they pitted at the same time, right?
Yep.
That shows the masterclass of Hamilton again. But yeah, those last couple of laps, I would have been on the edge of my seat thinking, okay, is this thing when is this gonna go? And again, strange. When have we ever got to a point where we've thought that the tires are gonna go like that? That's a different Mercedes than I've seen in the past.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I know they were warning about him, and I know on lap 24, I checked the gaps, and I happen to know it was lap 24 because I wrote down in my notes. Max was 7 seconds behind Bottas, and Valtteri was 2 or 3 seconds behind Hamilton. So I'm not quite sure if this is the full story or why they said they were driving and pushing so hard at that point. Did they need to be pushing that hard? Lewis made the comment, well, Valtteri was pushing real hard, so I had to keep the pace up. And I'm thinking, your closest rival was quite a ways behind you. Why were they pushing that hard? I have no idea. But they seem to imply that that's what they were doing.
Yeah, and that's tough. I mean, it all depends on what the communication was between the engineer of Hamilton and the engineer of Bottas, because if Hamilton thinks that pace is the same as his, he's not going to slow down because this is a win for he's going to do anything it takes. So for whatever reason, he thought that Valtteri was pushing. Yeah. Whether that's true or not, we don't know. But he felt that. But again, he made those tires last 2 more laps.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. That's impressive, and it's the same tire. They came in the same time, right? If I remember.
Yeah. I think. Yeah, I'm thinking they double stacked them, didn't they?
They did. Yeah.
Kind of. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's a great point. And, this is when we look back on Lewis when he first came in, he was known for tearing tires up. And look how far his racecraft has developed as a 6-time champion to be able to go 2 laps further than his teammate in the same machinery on the same tires is pretty impressive. Yeah. Incredible drive. I gotta say this because you're from Silverstone and you've been to your fair share of Grand Prix and races there. Here's the tragedy of the whole thing, in my mind. The tragedy in my mind, imagine, James, what that place would have been like and sounded like if we would have had 150,000 of the world's best Formula One fans. Imagine the sound. That crowd would have just lost their mind watching Lewis do that.
No, and that is the saddest part. And in fact, Martin Brundle said, I think halfway through the race that so the traffic is terrible there, right? The traffic on a race weekend. and his comments were, "I'm never going to complain about traffic again because we want the fans back, right?" Because it is that. I mean, you always hear of drivers saying, "Oh, I get an extra 2 or 3 tenths because of the energy of the crowd." But Silverstone is another level, man, and it would have erupted. There would have been, beers flying, Foster's beers flying everywhere because, blew the tire up and then crossed the line. It would have been erupted. It would have been fantastic.
Right. And to be honest with you, there would have been a huge section all wearing orange for Max, elated that he got second, So, it's just, that's the hard thing, and the British fans, I always think, are just the finest out there when it comes to the F1 race, and certainly Tifosi and Monza is awesome, Japan's awesome, and the like. But man, the British Grand Prix and Lewis going for that 7th win and doing it on 3 wheels, they would have just been losing it,
Yeah,
and
I did. I lost it. I was jumping up and down like, what's happening?
I know. I know. It's crazy. Like, oh my gosh, his tire's cutting. Is he going to catch? Yeah, it's crazy. Well, let's talk about Red Bull. Alex Albon in P8. Max Verstappen, as I mentioned, inherits P2. Max was running really a lonely third for most of the race. But when Bottas had his tire issues, they ended up, James, boxing Max in order to make a run for the fast lap. Now, hindsight's 20/20. I get it. But in doing so, he came out 30 seconds behind Lewis and threw away the victory when Lewis's tire deflated. It's easy to sit on the couch and say, oh my gosh, what were you thinking? But there's a part of me that wonders, given how savvy Red Bull's strategy team is, if Bottas's tires blew up, you got to be thinking that maybe Lewis would, but there was 1 lap left, and they probably thought, let's take the fast lap. But truth be known, James, they already had the fast lap in hand because Albon held it at that point.
And that's what's strange to me again is somewhere along the way they misread the tire. Because you're exactly right. As Red Bull are looking at this, you're going, well, those tires have got to be getting close to the edge. I mean, we have a decal on the TV saying 10%. So everyone's thinking, well, they're going to have to do something. That was a strange one as well. I thought the same thing when it came to Max is why would they have done that? I don't know, but even still, I think from Max's point of view, he didn't think he could win it anyway. I think he went into that race thinking he couldn't win it. It was the last lap where he's like, have I got a chance?
Yeah, you bring up a really good point. When they interviewed him after that, I got to be honest with you, a younger Max would have had some choice words for the team and the situation. But did you notice that's not the Max we have anymore? This Max was incredibly magnanimous. I mean, he was like, oh, look, I wouldn't have changed the decision. We weren't convinced that our tires were going to make it to the end, let alone theirs. So he says, no, we made the right call and went for the fast lap. And he said, no, I'm just elated and excited to have second.
Yeah. On a side note with Max, I think part of that is the younger guys that are coming in. They're showing so much more humility. They're showing so much more respect. And they're going to get rides based on some of those things too. And if Max doesn't adjust to that, because he didn't at all.
Right.
So that's just my side note.
No, it's a great point because it's, a team doesn't like, to deal with a head case,
Right.
They like drivers who are team players and can be collegial. And no, I agree. And Max, wow, I was like, I would have got out of that car and been a little upset if I was him, but he wasn't, he was composed, congratulated Lewis. Real champ type material, it was very interesting. So, Bottas's tire looked similar to Lewis's on the TV in my mind, and I was thinking maybe they would have anticipated that. They had the fast lap in Albums. Let's talk about Alex. He had that clash with Kevin Magnussen sending the Haas car out of the race. That garnered a 5-second penalty. After that, they had boxed him and switched him to a 2-stop strategy. He made his way back up through the field, claiming 8th. Before I offer my final thought on Alex, How did you see that incident? Was it clearly Albon's fault? Was it a racing incident? Was it Magnussen's fault? And did you think the penalty fit the crime?
That's a tough question. I think it was a strange one. So first of all, if I'm Albon, I'm sitting in Albon's car, right, and I see the guy in front make a mistake. He clearly dropped a wheel off, and so the gap is now open, right? So you go for a gap because that's what we do. The problem with that is that on the same side, when you gamble that early on, in his mind, he's thinking, I got to make up for the positions I've lost, and I got to make up for past races where I haven't done it, right?
Right.
In that situation, how well would he have done if he didn't have a 5-second penalty?
Mm-hmm.
So do you take that gamble? He gambled it, right? There clearly was a gap, right?
Yeah.
But we know that what's his name in front? What's his name?
Magnussen.
Kevin Magnussen. Magnussen isn't gonna leave that gap open. He's not.
He's gonna slam the door.
Oh
yeah.
And he's gonna do it with a finger, and he's gonna do it with whatever he wants, right? Because that's who he is. So I feel like it was more of a racing incident. Mm-hmm. However, I feel like Albon, if he would have just thought it through a little bit and thought, okay, the guy in front of me is not going to do this. I want to produce a result. That's my opinion. Yeah. And I feel sorry for Alex. I think he's a great guy, a good driver, and we're just not seeing the results that we know he's worthy of.
Yeah, I think you're right. I've been scratching my head ever since they called him up last year. I thought he did a great job filling in where Gasly was struggling. And then it led me to think about it after this race. Initially, at the beginning, I felt like the support for Alex from Horner and some of the management was kind of few and far between. And I thought, that's kind of strange. A lot of people talking about Alex in social media circles from fans and press, and I would have expected the team to be a little more vocal about it. Now, eventually, Horner did say, he didn't understand the criticisms of Alex and started defending him a little bit. But I got to thinking this weekend, James, and this is total tinfoil conspiracy, but I got to thinking, though, Alex did well when he was at AlphaTauri or Toro Rosso. And now that Pierre, he did well there and he moved up, didn't do well at Red Bull. Now he's back at AlphaTauri. He's doing really well again. Neither driver found it easy to drive for Red Bull. And I'm just curious what kind of pressure that team is putting on both these youngsters, because we saw Alex perform at Toro Rosso. We saw Pierre perform at Toro Rosso. And now we're seeing him go back and really perform at AlphaTauri. And I'm just wondering, is it the pressure? What's going on with these two guys?
I think there's a few things. So first of all, I'll give you a back history. I raced with Enrique Bernaldi a few times in Lamborghini Super Trofeo. And he was actually one of the first, before Red Bull was even announced, he was one of the first guys that was involved with a younger Red Bull sponsor, but there was no cars, right? And he had to report to Helmet, whatever the dude's name.
Yeah, Marco. Yep.
He told me that guy is just a piece of work. Really, really hard to please, to figure out. The pressure is immense. And I can only imagine that he's gotten worse and not gotten better.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think that's always there, the pressure. The other part, I think, is that you've got that massive amounts of pressure. Red Bull want results immediately. They expect both drivers to perform the same, right?
Right.
And then there's that idea with, favoritism at some point. And I hate bringing that up, but at some point, I believe all of their focus and concentration is on Max.
It's Max's team.
They know full well if they gave Albon a little bit of love, a little bit of caress, he would perform just as good. And in fact, in the younger categories, he beat Max a few times.
Right.
So for whatever reason, I think they may be concerned about losing Max.
Yeah. Right.
he's a hot commodity. He's a guy that if you were Ferrari, if you were Mercedes, if you were McLaren, why wouldn't you pick him up?
Yeah, for sure.
And his clause is always trying to get out, right? He's always got a get out clause of like, if performance isn't there, I'm leaving.
Right, right. Yeah, it's a good point. And, it's a tall order for anyone to move in that team and get measured against Max. But at the end of the day, James, you know far better than I do, that is your closest competition, and that is who you're measured by.
100%. And if you don't perform, the Formula One's not nice. Those teams are not nice to you. If you're not performing, you're out.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. Yep. I could see that. Let's go to Ferrari. You had Charles Leclerc in P3, Sebastian Vettel P10. Leclerc had a decent start, was up to third before Max got around him. I thought maybe he'd hold Max off, but couldn't do it. It was really kind of an equally lonely race for Charles for most of the day, and he ran well enough really to be in contention for a podium. So when Bottas lost his tire on lap 50, Leclerc pretty much inherited that spot. He was much more settled in his car than Vettel was, but the performance delta between the two cars was stark and shocking. But I thought it was a tidy race. It wasn't eventful. There wasn't any big grand adventures for Leclerc, right. But you got to be there to take advantage of the attrition he was.
He seemed a little bit more cautious around Max. He seemed like he didn't overexert himself. Mm-hmm. And I think part of that is that he needs to finish races, especially if Ferrari are going to put all their focus in him. And so when we saw that early on tussle, I think a little bit, he didn't, like I say, insert himself as much as I've seen in the past.
That's a great point. I didn't even think about that, James. Of course, you're a driver, that's all you think about, but I didn't even notice that. But you're spot on, because they were going toe to toe there at the beginning.
Yeah.
And he wasn't muscling. He wasn't going to do what he did, last year with Max. And it's a known commodity. And you're absolutely right. After taking Vettel out earlier this year, he's got to finish races, and he needed to up his game. And he gave Max a lot of quarter there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
More than normal.
Yeah, right. More than normal. It's a great point. Let's talk about Vettel's race. Certainly, Sebastian unsettled all weekend long. It wasn't just a race. And he spent the day battling with Ocon and Gasly, if you can believe that, saying his car wouldn't do anything he wanted to do. He had to fight the car the entire weekend, couldn't get the car to do anything that he normally would have done in a car. He was completely out of the points, but the two punctures in front of him handed him a point. Ends up in 10th. I'm just stumped at this. I don't know what's going on inside of that team, James, but Seb, to me, I've ridden with the guy 3 times, and once at 185 miles an hour. The guy knows how to drive a car.
Yeah.
And he's not incapable of curing a car or providing feedback to solve a car's bad handling. So I'm just really stumped, and he seems to be just, stumped as well at what was going on.
I think we've seen that pretty much all year long, where he's like, and Seb's pretty good at always going back to, he's very quick to say, I don't know how to make this car work, especially when he doesn't get a result. That seems to be his go-to. I think mentally he is just not figuring this out. I think this is tough, man. When you've been let go before the season even starts, I think that plays a huge role. And then how do you being a 4-time world champion, thinking I'm the man, how do you show up going, I'm going to do really well for my team, knowing that they don't even want me?
Right. Yeah, and it's even different if you're Daniel Ricciardo, because you're choosing to leave.
Yeah.
Renault. So he put in a great performance. It's Dan. He's doing it for Dan. But right now Seb is kind of like, I don't know how you stay motivated when you know the team didn't want you.
Does he actually need to prove the fact that he's a good driver? I don't think he should, because he's already done that.
Right.
Although I think he should, because we need to see it.
Yeah,
right. But it's a tough one. It's a tough one. And it's kind of sad seeing it, because, I think we were all wanting to see the the real fight between Lewis and him. And so it's a shame. It's like it's as if the team are just giving him exactly what is necessary, not what's all there. I don't know.
Yeah, and it almost seems like, and like you mentioned with Red Bull, it's clear that team's behind Charles.
Oh yeah, it's signed, deal, and done. It's game over.
That's exactly right. So anyway, let's talk. I mentioned Dan. Let's talk about Renault. You had Esteban Ocon in P6, Daniel Ricciardo in P5. What Renault left on the table on Saturday, James, they certainly remedied on Sunday with a terrific run to dual points, beating the McLaren and leading the best of the rest. That was a big moment for them because they were getting beat quite handily by McLaren. It was quite a reversal of what we've seen so far this season. I don't know if that suggests that the Renault likes tracks that it can stretch its legs a little bit. I'm not sure, but Daniel Ricciardo put in a terrific race, really. It was an interesting case because I guess I'll start with Dan. He was strong initially, and then during the middle of the race, it seemed like he just kind of cooled off. He was not really making any big gains. But then all of a sudden after that second stop, that stint really came in, and he came strong towards the end, ended up passing the McLarens. It was just a great turnaround there in the second half from Dan. It's great to see him up there fighting where I think he should be.
Yeah, agreed. I wonder whether that was part of the strategy was to, hold pace in the middle phase, showing great control from him because he's that same guy, right? He'll lick the stamp and send it, right? There's no question. But he was a great the first half, the middle he kind of settled down, and then we saw at the end. I agree. I think he came on strong, and it was great to see. I mean, I always love Ricciardo. I think he's always a good guy to watch.
He's terrific.
So agreed.
I love it. Yeah, I think you're probably right. You're probably, managing tires in that middle part and just, bringing it home and then put the pour the welly to it. For Ocon, he's had a very quiet return to F1, James. And this is a guy that made a lot of noise before he left in F1 over at Racing Point or Force India at the time. But he's had such a quiet return. And so for me, he really needed this result to give him confidence, get him back up in the fight, get people talking about Ocon. All right, he's back. He's up running right there with Daniel Ricciardo. If he isn't beating Dan, he's on his tail. And that's where Esteban's got to be if he has hopes of either staying at Renault long-term or even possibly getting a Mercedes ride in the future.
It's funny, me and Charles argued that point because I said that next year, if Ocon's still there and Alonso partners him, I think we'll see Ocon outshine Alonso. And he was like, never in a million years. and so I'm putting it out there because I think he has had a very slow return. I haven't been extremely impressed early on, but this weekend was a good sign of it. I think Danny Rick is good. He's quick, and I mean he was beating Vettel very strongly. So he's a strong guy. Yeah. But yeah, agreed. I was waiting for the turn on for Ocon, and finally he did.
Yeah.
And so it was an okay race. I don't think it was anything to really praise about, but it was better than he'd done at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, for sure. He had a good fight with Stroll. I enjoyed that. I thought he had a good battle with Stroll.
But it is Lance Stroll,
It is Lance Stroll, right.
No, yeah. And the carbon copy Mercedes.
right. And I always, when we talk about Lance Stroll, I want
it now! What's the matter with those twats down there?
A little Veruca assault for you.
100%.
Yeah, exactly. But it was a great dual points finish, and what a way to celebrate Alan Permain's 500th Grand Prix at that team. Alan's been around a long time. He's, I assume he still is, a very close friend to our friend, Steve Matchett. So they are good friends and have been for a long, long time. So congratulations to Alan and his 500th Grand Prix and a dual points finish. A great weekend. And maybe Cyril will stay around another race or two after that. So we'll see. Let's talk about McLaren. Your boys from Woking, probably not that far from where you grew up. Carlos Sainz, P13, Lando Norris, P5. Carlos had a good start, ran fifth for much of the race, but I was wondering, he was also complaining of this vibration that he was getting. And it slowed him down a little bit, and it left Lando radioing the team, said, Carlos has got to get a move on because I'm a sitting duck with Ricardo, and I'm kind of curious if that may not have actually cost P4 for Lando,
Yeah,
you know?
I think so too. Yeah.
Yeah. So I kind of felt bad because Lando, was trundling around behind Carlos, but it was all for nothing, really. In the end, Carlos suffered that deflated tire a few laps from the end, leaving him plunging down and out of the points, down in P13. Lando worked really hard to get by Ricardo, then lost that spot again, I think probably because being stuck behind Carlos and letting Dan get so close to him. And then Lando said he had to push harder than he wanted to for much of the race due to the lack of the pace compared to the cars around him. He just said the Renaults were faster, but still, I thought it was a good race from Lando, all things given, and I just thought his helmet was absolutely terrific.
I'm a huge fan of McLaren, always have been, and so just to see that they're back up in the front is great. Lando Norris, to me, is a top-notch guy. I'm excited to see him do well. I mean, his helmet design, what he's been doing, working on the cars. I mean, just everything that I see from that kid is a class act.
Yeah.
I agree. I think that pushing Saints a little bit more pushed that tire over the edge.
Yeah.
And it was fun to see Saints at the beginning really try to push. Mm-hmm. He seems to be on cloud nine still, doesn't he? He seems to have this great momentum behind him. And I think we're slowly seeing that same momentum build with Norris as well.
Yeah, I think so. I think Lando knows that Carlos is leaving, and he's, kind of putting his foot on the neck of that team and trying to be the guy there. And it'll be a wake up call next year when Dan shows up. But we'll see how that goes. Yeah, I thought it was great. Look, the sport can have these. Any sport, pick a sport, can have these big global causes and campaigns and all those issues. But I got to be honest with you, man. It's the simple things, like Lando having a contest and a 6-year-old girl designing his helmet.
Yep.
That's what F1's about, man.
100%,
F1 can't solve, world hunger and cure cancer and move the moon closer to the earth. But what it can do is make that little girl, feel incredibly special and make fans for life over that. And that's such a touching moment. So I thought it was great and good for Lando doing it. As you say, it just shows the kind of guy he is. And I think it's terrific. Great result for them. Although they got another weekend coming up, and they're going to have to do something to get on top of those Renaults if they want to be best of the rest. Let's talk about AlphaTauri. Normally aren't talking about this team quite this early in the review, but we had Daniel Kvyat at a DNF and Pierre Gasly in an inspired P7. Let's talk Danny first. Started at the back of the grid, James. He had that gearbox change. That moved him to the back of the grid, but he made it all the way back up and was running with his teammate, both heading towards a points finish. Denny had this odd crash at Maggots, and I felt like I watched that, and I listened to Martin Brundle, and I know he felt like it, and then I think Franz Tost may have even sort of confirmed it, but it didn't look like a driver error to me.
No, it didn't.
Did it to you?
No, it didn't. It didn't. I mean, it happened so quick. That's a fast part of the track. When I saw the crash, I was like, bloody hell, that's a big one, right? That's a big one. And so I was happy to see him get out of the car. But you could almost tell when he's turned in, right? There's no way that paint on the left would even is enough to bring up that tire and make it spin. But you see it kind of squat in the back, in that back right, and I think that was it. I think that's exactly what it was. It was a right rear or puncher that just settled down and then boom, gone.
Yeah. I kind of watched that back and forth several times trying to figure out, he took a little bit of curb, and I get it, but boy, I couldn't imagine it unsettling the car like that.
No, and it's not really that much of a curb there either. It's because it was that red paint, and it wasn't. If I remember, it's not raised that much.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but you know, it was interesting to have him also say, sorry guys, because he actually thought it was him, and he doesn't normally apologize. He's normally not that guy either. So that was cool to see.
Yeah, yeah. He was sort of, hands up, my fault, because he
Yeah.
didn't know what had happened. He just thought he lost the back of the car. What a terrific run by Pierre. He fought Vettel hard, claimed the spot, then took on Stroll, made that work for himself, got all the way up into P7. It's great to see Pierre come back on song. And I mean, he had a terrific day at the office. Sure, he didn't win the race or anything, and wasn't even a podium, but he doesn't have a car to do that. But I would argue, I'm not sure he's got a car to do P7 either. And for him to pull that out, I thought it was a great day at the office.
I think it's great. I've been waiting. He's a class act too. I think he's quick. Again, the whole Red Bull thing. As soon as he can get out of that whole family and into another environment, I think we'll see an amazing Gasly. Again, I think it was a good race, solid. He drove well from the beginning to the end. A good, solid drive. You can't fault that. I don't think.
Yeah, great drive. Let's see. Racing Point, Nico Hulkenberg, DNS, Lance Stroll, and P9. Racing Point started the weekend poorly with Sergio Perez testing positive for COVID-19. Now, that meant that he was going to be sidelined for at least this weekend and possibly next weekend. They made it quick, and I would argue correct decision to bring Nico Hulkenberg back, because he's one of the few guys around that has a super license. So they brought him back in like on 24 hours notice to fill in. And he did a decent job in qualifying, James, given that he's been out of the sport for 8 months and he's never driven this car ever. He doesn't know the steering wheel layout, the engine mappings, nothing. And he got in, qualified pretty well. Unfortunately, the team were completely unable to get Nico to the grid to start the race.
Conspiracy.
Exactly. Yeah, they said it was a clutch bolt issue that he suffered a DNS. And you think all that work for a DNS? I don't know.
I'm not feeling it, man. First of all, it's great to have the Hulk back on the grid, right?
Yeah, it is.
I'm hoping he's going to be in the car again for this coming weekend. I was in my mind, I was like, is this it? Are we going to see the podium that he deserves?
Exactly.
Right? Are we going to see it? And it's going to be on the back end of the whole COVID crap and the one race. That's what I was hoping for. So I'm still hoping for that this weekend as well. I got to be honest. But at the end of the day, how could I not think it's not a conspiracy? We know full well he was going to outperform Lance. We know it, right? Because he's good.
Yeah,
he's always been good, right? I mean, the guy is class act, fast, cool. I was disappointed that he wasn't at the start of that race, and that's why I think it's a conspiracy.
I love it. That's awesome. It's a great conspiracy. What is interesting to me is that the pink cars looked quite a bit off the pace compared to where many expected them to be, given their design cues and Mercedes shove in the back of that car. This wasn't the case all weekend long. And one wonders if, here's another conspiracy part of me. When I watched them not do well at this circuit, given the Mercedes were trouncing everyone, and I watched them just at the last race do really well, and I'm thinking, wow, okay, so they've got people really scrutinizing that car now, and the FIA is under they're investigating them over the legality of their chassis. And I'm wondering if they didn't make some investigation-friendly changes that has changed or impacted that car's performance to the negative, but might protect them in this investigation. So I'm very curious about that. That's my own conspiracy.
Yeah. The old, oh crap, let's take those parts off that we copied from them and this one off. And absolutely. I mean, I think that team in general, how many, first of all, I don't think I've ever seen a car come in and copy another guy's car, right? Mm-hmm. That's a strange one. And then second of all, have we ever seen a really non-team show up and be that good like that before? I don't think I have. So yeah, I think we'll see up and downs with them as a team they'll be really quick, and then they're going to be off, and then they're going to be up again. I think partly could be to do with those parts as well. You never know.
Yeah, you don't. And I also found it. So Renault again this weekend filed another complaint about around the brakes, but they have to do that at every race. So after the first lodged, protest, they have to protest every race's results in order that if they're found guilty, then every race their points will be removed, if that's what the penalty is. But I did find it interesting today. I read that Ferrari now are quoting the FIA regulations where it talks about that the listed parts must be of the team's own design. And Ferrari they sent a letter to the FIA asking clarification how copying someone's car from visuals can be actually considered, quote, design.
Yeah.
So,
ask the Chinese that too, because they're
right. Yeah, that's exactly right. So when you think about it, though, Ferrari, who had a car just beaten by a Racing Point this weekend, all of a sudden now they're interested in taking the hot poker to this team too. So yeah, interesting. Lance Stroll had a tough day, fell slowly out of the points. But the punctured tires ahead of him meant that he was able to inherit a couple points up into P9. He said, just didn't have pace. He was playing the whole thing down too. Not a good weekend for this team and not where I expected him to be. Let's move to Williams. Sir Frank Williams. You had George Russell in P12, Nicholas Latifi in P15. Sure, there was attrition ahead of them, but Williams ran well in qualifying. Claire didn't feel like they converted that completely into the race, but I kind of felt like they did a decent pace to run near the points anyway, in the same neighborhood, in the hands of George Russell. George started at the back of the grid for ignoring yellows during qualifying, but he overtook Raikkonen and Latifi, his own teammate, got up into P12. George, I think, is also a very good talent, James, and I think he's wasted there at Williams. And it's unfortunate, but he's knocking the points, and so Paul and I always talk about this, James, that you could see it in Alonso and a Minardi, right?
Yeah.
When there's a driver getting performance and results out of a car that has no business producing those kind of results, you got something.
Yeah, I rate George. I think that guy is gonna be something big. I think he's hoping for that the Mercedes link, right?
Yeah.
And I hope that stays up, because I think you could put him in Bottas's position, and I think we'd have an even closer race between him and Hamilton. Yeah. I think Hamilton's experience would probably get the edge over him, but I think it'd be bloody close.
Yeah. Could be why Bottas will be there again next year.
Yeah. Maybe it's just a shame, because I want to see a great champion with great competition. That's all I want to see as well.
Yeah.
And I think it's sad to see Russell being held back.
Yeah.
When you're seeing Leclerc with the opportunity,
right,
with Albon with the opportunity, and Russell not yet.
And Ocon.
Yeah. Yes. Right. Ocon with the opportunity. Yeah. And so George not having that, and I think that's sad. I think that is.
Yeah. Sad. I'm not taking anything away from Leclerc, because I think he is a rare talent, and Ocon's great, Albon's great, and all those guys. But I do think George is a cut above.
Yeah, he's special.
And he's the one guy that doesn't have the decent ride,
Yeah.
And we always talk about, people say, well, there's a lot of luck involved, and there is. But some of the drivers, I know when Lewis left McLaren, people thought he was crazy, but he read the tea leaves. He made that move right at the right time. Schumacher moved to Ferrari, had to work his tail off to get that team back up and going, and they did. I would say that Vettel, with Red Bull peaking at that right time, those 4 titles, all of that all plays in there. And I just was hoping Russell might get that Bottas seat to take the fight in the best car in the grid to Lewis. And what an epic battle. 2 Brits battling it out at Mercedes would be great.
We can only wish.
Yes, exactly.
But if if I'm Mercedes, that's what I would want to do next. Is I would do that.
Yeah.
Right, because Bottas isn't going to fill the shoes of Hamilton.
Right.
So who are they going to have? And they're going to have to start again new. So I'm hoping that have they signed a deal with another year with Bottas already?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was hoping they'd take a punt on George.
Yeah.
But they haven't. So let's see. Nicholas Latifi had a battle with Kimi, and Grosjean secured P15. Not in the points, but it is progress, and the team should be positive about pushing the car maybe even harder next week. I think the car held up pretty well. How do you see Latifi's? He's first year in Formula One. He's had some spins, had some thrills and spills, but finished P15. He's got to cut his teeth somewhere. You think he's doing okay?
I think he's racing better than the practice and qualifying that I've seen. I don't think he's doing a grand job. He's not setting the world alight in qualifying, but I think in the races he does seem to move forward. But I think I've also seen some pretty stupid maneuvers and spins and stuff as well. So I don't think he's going to be a talent like we've seen, like the young ones are in there now. At this point, as far as I can tell, I don't see him being a special kind of guy.
Right. I understand. Alfa Romeo, Kimi Räikkönen, P17, Antonio Giovinazzi, P14. Kimi struggled all afternoon, was not happy. He had all kinds of F-bombs and stuff on the radio. He was not happy. And why would he be? He got passed by both Williams, so you can imagine that frustration. Not a happy Finn.
What is going on there?
I don't know.
What is going on there?
I mean, no idea.
It's embarrassing.
Yeah.
We're talking Kimi Räikkönen that far back. It's embarrassing. Why even do it? At some point, why?
Yeah. I know the motivation. Yeah. When he moved there as a former champ, if he was running in the points, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, if he's running in the points and Alpha was thereabouts, I could see him saying, that's fine. It's his personality. I could see him fine. But running at the back of the grid and getting passed by Williams, I don't know. I thought 2 seasons ago, Fred Vasseur had done a great job in hanging on to that Ferrari, but that Ferrari engine now is a massive liability to this team.
Yeah.
So I don't know what's going to happen. Giovinazzi did a little better. He had the hard compounds. He was better on the hard compounds. He fell back late in the race, though, and he had a penalty for a safety car violation. That didn't help. And it's a shame because at one point earlier in the race, James, both these guys were running. They climbed up to 12th, and I thought, okay, they're going to be thereabouts, But boy, they sink like a
storm. Is that because of the pace car? Though, did they not take? Did they take tires early on, or did they just use that to climb up there?
I don't recall. I just read that it was a safety. Yeah, it was a safety car violation. I don't recall it being explained, or the on F1.com. I don't remember them explaining what it was. To be honest with you, yeah. So any of you listening, let me know.
Yeah, they did. To me, they didn't impress me. That was a bit of a no-show, boring race for those guys.
Yeah, no doubt. Even a worse race for Haas. You had Kevin Magnussen, we mentioned, was DNF. Romain Grosjean on P16. Kevin's race ended quickly. He was punted off by Albon heading into the final corner. We already talked about Kevin, but let's talk about Romain. So he stayed out during the second safety car. That kept him up and well into the points. It didn't work out, and he was shown the black and white flag for his defense on Sainz. Roman later offered the same defense against Ricciardo and was given a warning by the steward, so a slap on the hand. To be fair, okay, both moves Brundle said were late and not what you would expect from a GPDA president. I did find it interesting the stewards were so focused on his driving style and waving multiple flags at that point. It's a weekend to forget, but I read something today, James, that was hilarious. He said, Romain Grosjean, when asked about his defensive blocking, he said, I'm paraphrasing, something along the lines of, well, he did it because he was taking his cues after what Max Verstappen had done in the past. And so since that was fair game, he did it. He doesn't like doing it. He doesn't like doing those moves, but since it's fair and Max gets away with it, he was doing it.
Oh, my goodness. What a thing to say.
Yeah.
I don't get it. You know, it's pretty simple, right? The marshals, the clerk of the course, all those guys, they just don't want you to be reacting to it, right? So as you're going down, you know that if a guy is close enough or he's got a toe, that you're going to go defensive. What they don't want to see is they don't want to see the reactionary, right?
Right.
And time and time again, I mean, he did it and did it and did it, and some of them were unsafe. The one on Ricardo, I thought was a bit scary.
Yeah, you saw Ricardo react.
Flipping over that, you know, that's what happens. So that was if that's what he said, that's stupid. I can't be honest. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, I thought, oh, dude, you didn't just come out and blame Max Verstappen for your defensive moves. Is that what you just did?
And being the head of the driver of the Grand Prix Association. Are you kidding me? Come on, man. Like,
yeah. I thought that was rich. Yeah.
Wow.
So anyway, I thought you'd find that humorous. Well, that is how they finished, and that's what we think about how they finished. But we always offer up some awards at the end of a race review podcast. And the first award of a race review podcast is Pass of the Race. Woo! All right. My pass of the race, James, I'm going to go with Pierre Gasly passing Sebastian Vettel.
Yeah.
I thought, boy, what better way to put salt into a wound than to get passed by Pierre Gasly in an AlphaTauri. That was on lap 38 for those playing at home. So
I have to agree. Unfortunately, that was going to be mine too. I was jumping up and down, right? Because Pierre, come back, man, and do what a maneuver, and it was big, and it was on Ferrari.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I that was mine.
That's so funny. Yeah, that was it was a good pass. I really enjoyed that one.
Yeah.
Let's see. The next award we always hand out is Donkey of the Race. All right. I'm keen to know, who do you think was the real donkey of this race?
I had two, but I'm going to go with Romain Grosjean.
Well done.
Especially now.
Yeah, right. That's a good pick.
I mean, he's gone for the long strategy. I get it. He's made the good deal on the safety car. I get it. But then to just, play those kind of games at those kinds of speeds, I mean, that's just stupid. It's just
in some part, donkey. James, if you're in that car and I radio you from the wall and I tell you we're going to keep you out for track position, everybody else boxes and you're now running, let's say, fifth. You're on older tires, you're going for a long stint, and you're going for track position. So when the cars come back out, they're good. You have to, in your mind, James, aren't you thinking, I'm going to get past. Yes. This isn't about me finishing in fifth, not at this point of the race. It's about me being in the top 10.
Yep.
Right?
No, absolutely. And there are some tracks that you can be smart at and defend in a way that's annoying to all the other drivers, but in some ways safe.
Right.
Unfortunately, Silverstone isn't that one.
Yeah.
Right. When you're going down Hanger Straight and you're getting a toe anyway, and then you push the button, it's coming. There's nothing you can do.
Yeah.
And when you try, that's a result for the other thing too is I wonder how much when they made that strategy change and they kept him out, whether he looked after and drove to the tire.
Yeah. Right? Good point.
Mm-hmm. When I mean that is, it's so easy to go, okay, let me push and get a gap, right? But you're going to destroy your tires. And each time you roll in and you turn and it starts to slide, if you keep doing that, it's going to get worse and worse and worse and worse and worse.
Right.
So you've always got to drive to the tire, and I wonder whether he didn't do that. That's why he's not high on my list. I mean, he doesn't get it. He doesn't get it.
That's good. My donkey, I had Racing Point. Is the one I picked for that. They were woefully off the pace. Couldn't get Hulkenberg on the grid. Come on, man. If you're going to bring the Hulk back, you better let the Hulk run.
Right.
You know? Come on. I just thought that was unfortunate. So
disappointing. Anyway. That's a conspiracy anyway. They didn't want.
Yeah, there you go. I like it. All right. Well, the last award is always Drive of the Race. That's right. See, that's the kind of funk Charsley likes right there. You know,
we should have him sing on the old podcast.
We should. I know.
Yeah, get his guitar out and get him singing.
Yeah. He'd be like David Brent. You know, out there. Go get the guitar. Yeah. All right. So drive of the race, not driver, but just the drive of the race. Who did you have?
Hamilton for me still.
Yeah. It's hard not to give it to Lewis, man. Finishing that race on 3 wheels, that's terrific. And like I said, it's not that it hasn't. You know, Jim Clark back in the day finished with his right rear suspension, broke. People, Tazio Nuvolari had a steering wheel come off, and he managed to finish a race. So, it's not that people haven't done that with adversity or weirdness and situations that have happened. But I'm not taking anything away from Lewis. The fact is, he had 2 miles to go and no front left tire. And it would have been really, really heart in the throat moment. And you would have really wanted to give it some welly, but he couldn't because it would have delaminated and destroyed his car, ending the race. So he really drove that fine line between keeping enough pace but not tearing the car up, and it was a great race. The only other person I would offer up as drive of the race is Pierre Gasly. I thought he had a great race.
That's a fair point. I think Pierre Gasly. I think that should be a highlight.
Yeah.
For Lewis, I think just what he's doing right now. No one's showing up like he's showing up. Mm-mm. No one's digging as deep as he's digging, and that should be highlighted. That. A Lewis 3 years ago with a flat tire like that would have been on the radio yelling and screaming the whole way to the front line. He was very calm.
He was.
And he was just looking at the numbers. He's got such great trust with his engineer, and it's just great to see. I think we're seeing pure, what's the word? Championship qualities.
Yeah, for sure.
You saw it with Schumacher. You saw it within NASCAR with Jimmy Johnson. You see it with these greats, Michael Jordan. That kind of stuff, and you're seeing it as a team effort. And you're just seeing this, and people are too busy complaining about him as a person and not seeing the great history that he is creating right now, because it's insane what he's doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and you bring up a good point. It's a team effort, and that, and not to take anything away from what he's doing. What he's doing is fantastic, but it probably is easier to remain calm when you have a car like that, when you have a team like that, when you have a team that's going to come up and do everything they can to support the best strategy. They're all working their tail off. They're measuring twice and cutting once, and that adds a level of pressure and stress that he doesn't have to worry about those elements that people like driving for Alfa Romeo do, or Haas, right?
Yeah.
He doesn't have to worry about those things. And just everything about that, Lewis's driving, what he's doing, what he's producing, the drives, the type of skill that he's showing is just champion quality. The team, champion quality, everything about that entire program. So I couldn't agree more. All right. Well, that does it. That's what we think about the British Grand Prix. That's what we think about the teams and drivers. James, it's been awesome having you back on and sitting in for Paul Charsley. Thank you so much for coming on the show. If you like this podcast, folks, go over to iTunes, give us a good rating, tell a friend about it, share it with a friend. That always helps. Spread the good word. Don't keep it to yourself. Be sure to stop by the website, theparcfermé.com. Share your opinions. Just do it decorum and civility as always. You can send us questions over there for the podcast or mailbag, and we'll read those. If you really like the podcast, you can support us on our Patreon page. Just go to our website, top right-hand side. There's a Patreon. It says support us on Patreon. You click on that. You can support us for as little as $1 a month, folks. So feel free to do that. I just dropped a new TPF Stories this past week. It's called Racing Driver Wanted, and I have a great time researching those stories. So I hope you enjoy that podcast. So far, it seems like people are having fun with that series. So I hope you like that series. But until next week, when we come back to do it all over again, this is Todd, a.k.a. Negative Camber, saying so long.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.